First up, I don't know if all of you know me and what I do as work, but I have a YouTube channel, which is my main platform to share my passion, which is visualization and representation. And I speak with students all over the world, and hopefully a lot of you as well. If you haven't followed me, be sure to follow. So I speak with over 400,000 people around the world on YouTube, but also we offer premium courses. So this is a way we can get in depth on specific topics of architecture-related visual communication topics. And we also have resource packs, which are like these small bundles that can help you create better drawings. So this is just an introduction to say that this encompasses the international platform that is dedicated to exploring the world of visualization and representation. Something I've been very passionate throughout school, and after getting to know Steven and seeing how this can be so impactful for the architecture community in general. So I'm super happy to be here and presenting what I do as a living and share more with you guys. So now into the presentations topic. If we go a couple of decades back when architecture had a lot of manpower required to be able to produce construction details, we kind of cannot really relate, especially the newer generation, of how we don't understand how much work required to make drawings and make construction details and really practice architecture in the past. Now we have a laptop that has more than enough work and power than a whole office. And we have this, every one of the students have one of these, and combined with creative software, this is such an impressive tool. And so I want to dive into the communication part of architecture, which is something so intrinsic to our profession. And if we look at these softwares, they allow us to be more efficient architects, but also allows us to be more creative and explore different emotions and sensations that architecture is all about. So why communication is so important? Because it's a complex subject. It requires a lot of thinking. You guys have immense amount of working at the university. And architecture is technical. It's about dimensions, construction details. It's very rational, but it's also emotional. It's about space, light, and how it makes you feel. So there's this big contrast in architecture. And speaking is only one way you can communicate in architecture. Words most often are not enough to really express what we have to say about a new building that's coming up. And I brought this from my archive of photos defending my final thesis in 2017. So images and drawings, they have to speak for themselves. And it's so important to be able to effectively do that as students, as architects, in any of the specific niches within architecture. And mastering this visual communication tool as architects is how you can fully express yourself. Otherwise, it's just like maybe a writer that is not really good at writing. So what's the point in that? And beautiful renderings, they're great. I mean, they look cool and all, but visual communication as architects is much more than that. And that's what I want to talk about in this presentation. I want to dive into this topic and show you different possibilities within this part of architecture. Because it's about storytelling, it's about conveying ideas and creating visually engaging presentations. You're talking to someone else on the other side, and you want to convince that person, but also make them understand what you have in your head and fully translate all of these concepts to them. So to begin, I brought 3 case studies that really go a different route on what you would expect from visual communication. I'll go over them, and then we'll talk about a bunch of other topics later. So the first case study is a recent project that I have been working with. It's still ongoing. I can't say too much about it, but the results are super cool, super different as well. I'm not going to explain the project itself, but tell you about the challenges we have in terms of visual communication. So it was a large-scale project, health facilities, and this was an international competition of bidding/project. So we had to submit a project, but also how much it was going to cost, like what each of the parts of the team, how much they were going to charge, and so the jury would evaluate both the pricing but the project. The pricing had a bigger weight on this. And at the end of the process, we had only 72 hours to create the images, but we didn't have enough details. This was a very preliminary project, international in Oman, or for the firm that I was joining to do this, we're more focused on getting the basics. Like this was the plan that we delivered, for example. You can see that there's not much detail in terms of structure. We kind of had an idea, but the layout was very preliminary. So we thought, oh, and by the way, we did this with, it's down here, Oliver Uszkurat. It's still ongoing. As soon as it comes out, I'm going to share more information about this. So we thought, should we create a realistic rendering? How can we actually show the project without having to compromise ourselves with specific details that we haven't really developed? So the solution, maquette style. We used a maquette style render to create a set of images that show the volume, the volumetric of the project better than possibly a realistic render could do here. We tried to make it as close to a physical maquette as possible so that they could imagine that this was actually made by our hands, but this was rendered. I'm not going to show you every one of the images, but my favorites, you can see that it looks like a maquette, but it also shows the scale, the proportions, the access, the relation to the street, even the vegetation, which is more like a like a maquette style, right? With the specific, not the specific plants defined, but to show that there's a thought behind the landscape here as well. And this served us well with the whole narrative that we had. Not enough details, but we thought about a lot of things like the roofing, the facade elements, but the materials, they are for another step in the design process. And we did, let me go back to we did like 3 set of images for each project. So an aerial visual image, something in between, and then in person, which is this one that I brought, as if, and I used a lot of depth of field to simulate as if I was taking with a real camera. This is the photo from this maquette. So this is the first case study to show you that realistic rendering here wouldn't really come in handy, and we had way more efficient workflow doing this way instead of going the traditional route. Now for the case study number 2, this is a futuristic / dystopian project, which you might see that might be realistic. I had to show the rising sea level in the next 100 years. Again, very limited time to represent. I think this is a common topic within architecture. We get to the final stages and then now I gotta do the renders. Now I gotta do the diagrams. So, and this one specifically, it was in Santos, São Paulo, Brazil. I had to show the impact of this. And this is a final thesis from Escola da Cidade, which is a really, really good school in São Paulo, more conceptual. They do, the thesis is you can do pretty much anything. So the author, Julie, she wanted to show how the impact of the global, forgot the word, the global temperature, rising temperature could affect our cities, especially Santos, which is an oceanfront city. So here we started from a Google Earth-based image. This is a little bit treated, like I did like sort of like a filter to have some more identity. I don't know if I'm covering you guys here. Is it okay? Awesome. And instead of trying to model everything and try to render something that could show the impact of the rising sea level, we did this in Photoshop with a few hours. It was a little bit of work, but it got us to a really impactful image that really just doing this in a presentation pretty much sells you the whole idea, like what's going to happen to the city. So we measured more or less the rising sea level, if it was going to go up into the tree levels, what floors. And her project was one of these capsules that could join together to maybe have an alternative housing solution to the city. So this is in 75 years and in 150 years. So dystopian / realistic, but it was really cool. So Photoshop allowed us to be creative and show this impact without having to spend too much time in the 3D. Obviously, the capsules are 3D and rendered, but the city, it's Google Earth image. Then case study number 3, so that we finalize the case studies and we go to the specific topics. Here I brought something different, something personal. This is a national student competition that I did just after I delivered my final thesis. I decided, why not? Like, I just finished this project. I have some free time. I'm going to join this one. And this is a cultural itinerary pavilion. So itinerary is something that you can build and rebuild and move just like a circus. So the design had to be lightweight and easy to build. Not that this really impacted the visual communication part, but just to give you some context. But still, it also led me to some representation guidelines. And since this was a competition, I had to display a lot of information, and I had only 2 boards to do so. And this got me first place on the national competition. Probably, if you follow my channel and saw some of my videos, you probably know what this project is all about. But it's this small pavilion, cultural pavilion, that I designed and then represented to this national competition in 2 boards. So the first one was more to give a sense of the project, have the hero image and show the face of it with a few of the information. But the second board was where I could really dive into the specific details. And I used many different types of isometric diagrams to talk about it. Here, this main isometric shows more or less the relationship with the interior space, but it was with these next ones that I could tell a story about how the space was going to be used and what it could do. So from a blank canvas, something that could be used by the public when it was not in use, to grand presentations, to several contents, small contents, to really have a flexible layout. And I was able to do this because I used a lightweight structure still, but also and this board was all about the specific details. So I even brought I don't know how you say that in English, but the gráfico de momento fletor, something like with when you can use the overhang beams to counterbalance the weight, and then thus making the structure even smaller. So you can see that all of this, there's a lot of things going on here, but all of this was done, it was possible because I explored the visual communication part. If I just had plans and sections here, possibly the story wouldn't be the same, and maybe the first prize wouldn't be mine. The project is good, but I was able to tell the story to the jury better. And with this, we finalized the case studies. I just wanted to give you, to show you different approaches to design, to architecture that I know in school you might do a lot of that, but when you are in a firm, in an actual practice, you probably don't have time to explore the different aesthetics and different styles. But here I'm showing that, yeah, it's a national student competition or a final thesis, but the first one, a maquette style, was an international competition for a real firm. Now, you might be wondering, can I explore the different styles for any type of audience? No, that's why I want to talk about audience, because you want to know who the person on the other side is and why that matters. Most likely you're going to be dealing with clients, and clients, they don't know too much about the typical client. They don't know too much about architecture, and maybe a collage wouldn't be a great fit for them. But academic, it's something else. Competitions, entirely different as well. Then contractors, maybe a realistic rendering is helpful, but details, plans, sections, all of that stuff you extract from a BIM software is the way to go. So let's dive deeper into each of these categories, and I'll show you more examples. First off with academic, this is where you are right now, and I think that you will know that it's all about experimentation and being abstract. And what I like about this part of the career is that you should, or maybe you can, focus on the process. It's not only about showing the final result as a finished, beautiful piece that is shining there, but more show the progression, the ideas, the whys, the how you got there. And something that I've got to know by talking with students like you and students all over the world is that each school has some sort of school of thought, like a line of way of thinking that's done by the faculty, by you guys that teach the students. And they sort of expect you to follow some sort of path. And to bring you an example, I have this really good friend of mine that's from Barcelona, and he goes to ETSAB. And there they are, I don't know if today, but like 10 years ago when he went to school, they are way more square, rational, and they expect that sort of a design approach, both design, but also representation. He went to Berkeley, California for a semester, and there they were a lot more into shapes, organic forms, creative abstract collages. He found himself there, whereas in ETSAB, he thought he felt too rigid. So not that this is wrong in any way, each school has its different style, but know that if you're in school, sometimes you might be trying to explore a different route, but it might not be working, but know that professors are trying to teach you a way of thinking, a way to solve design problems. So just understand that, but it's also a place to be a little bit more creative. And for this, I'm bringing the example of my final thesis, which there's a video about it on YouTube. Some of you might have seen it. And well, I could spend a whole hour here talking about my final thesis, but I'm going to focus on one specific part, the technical aspect, the construction part of it. So just for you, if you haven't seen this project before, this is the general shape of it, which is very unique. And I had to show that I understood how to make that possible. I brought here just a simple export from ArchiCAD, which is this section, exploded section, isometric section. But as is, it has some contrast, but it looks kind of bland. So with a little bit of Illustrator and Photoshop, I was able to go from this to this, which is very subtle, not too many textures, not too many fills, but I was able to highlight the brick facade to show a little bit of depth, overlay, a shadow. So these are the things that visual communication as architects allow us to think of. It's not only the steps, the workflow that you're going to do, but why you're doing that. I added the shadows here, this very subtle shadow that maybe here you can't see too much, but on the board that I printed, you could. The shadow here just to indicate that there's an upper level, a ground level. So this was one of the boards, the more technical boards, but the structure as is can be kind of confusing. And the professors, the jury that were evaluating my work, they also wanted to know if I fully understood what I was showing here. Oh, this is his own version to see that there's a lot of detail here. So to show that I fully understood, so this is a tool, communication tool, not only for the audience, but for yourself. I created a set of these simple sequence diagrams, isometric diagrams, that each tell a different part of the structure, a story of that part of the structure, starting with the ground floor, which is made of reinforced concrete, and that was the support for the upper floor. Then following that, the truss floor, which I think are called cerchas, right? Which was like the perimeter of this and was the main part of the structure. From this, I went to the metal tie rods, which gave some structural locking. You can see that each part of that I'm adding here, I'm using the orange color, which was the accent color of my project. So I was telling the story to the jury as well. From here, the steel deck support with steel profiles as well. Then steel trusses, which held the roof, but also helped to distribute the load distribution, helped with that. And then finalized with a perimeter locking, which was the brick support. And I hope to really make this shape come to life. So all of these, they allowed me to present technical information in a visually appealing way that's easy, even for you guys to understand, and I could go over here quite quickly. But also, it demonstrated that I had a deep understanding of each component of this structure. So not only it looked good, but it also served a purpose. So this is one of the most important things you gotta keep in mind. It's not only about the beautiful renders, but how they're gonna help you communicate what you're thinking. And yeah, if you wanna know more about the project, it's sort of an outdated video, a little bit old, but I go into all of the boards, different techniques of representation, and more about the project. Okay, then after academic, we've got clients. The typical clients, the ones that 99% of you are going to be dealing with, the ones that they want as close to reality as possible. They want realistic renderings, and we want to be as clear and simple as possible. And that's okay. Maybe you're not going to be able to do exploded diagrams with them, but this is different tools for different audiences. But you might end up with artistic clients. Maybe you're doing a house for a museum curator, and that they are gonna appreciate that type of solution. But a client is a client after all, so you got to speak to the audience. Here I brought an example of visuals I did for Homo Arquitetos. This is a residential building in Curitiba that we had to, this was going to be built. So we had Homo Arquitetos, the firm, they hired me, and also the real estate development. They wanted the renderings so that they could sell the apartments, so they could build the apartment, the building. So the renderings had to show as close to reality as possible. So we even went with a drone photo and took a photo from the context added to the renderings. This was done with Photoshop, that background, and we tried to show how the building was going to look like. I did around 30 images for this project. I only brought 4 here, but what I wanted to show you is that we tried speaking with the architect as well, tried to show how the clients, so they could visualize themselves in the space. Different points of views, different angles, but all of them with a lot of thought behind. And then I brought here a set of interior images as well. So we did each type of apartment a different design solution and represented and visualized in a different way. And then I brought here the photo. So this was built, and the similarity is really impressive, both in the camera position, but also in how we were able to really picture this space, this design, as best as we could. For the curious out there, I used V-Ray on that, but a lot of Photoshop. V-Ray because it was done 3 years ago. If it was today, I would use D5 probably. But you can see that even the render looks more live than the photo, because here the vegetation hasn't grown up yet. There wasn't like a woman in a bike crossing the street. So with visual communication tools, you're able to try to make the client sense how that space is going to look and feel like. Now, for the competitions, I would say it's a mix. You're dealing with a jury. Competitions is not the audience, it's the jury. So it's in terms of visual communication, you got to think that the person on the other side is not going to be hearing you explain the project. So the images, they got to speak for themselves even more than the typical client. The boards, right? So you got student competitions and open idea, which I'll say that they have even more creative freedom than school. A lot less restrictions. There's no grades involved, and it's a great place to get outside of your comfort zone. Because in school, you're kind of following a path, a trend. Your classmates are doing the same project, so you sometimes you get comfortable. So competitions are hard, but they are amazing to build a portfolio, especially if you're looking to get into these renowned firms that there's a lot of competition to go in. Actual competitions, they help with that. And then we've got buildable real competitions, which is like the health facilities that I showed you with maquette style. There are various types of competitions when it comes to the real ones. But here I think a mix between strong concept drawings that prove that your design can be built and realistic rendering. So showing that you have full control of what you're designing plus realistic renderings might be the best solution. As an example, I brought a competition I joined with Homo Arquitetos as well, the same I did the visuals before, but this time I joined as architect and also in charge of the images. In this one, we got 3rd place. This was a real competition for a residential building in Curitiba, but it was open to national and it was nationwide, so firms from São Paulo, Rio, all over Brazil joined in. It was quite intense. We spent 2 months working on it, and the boards needed to speak for themselves. So we spent as much time as we could. No presentation here, and these types of boards, they also may require a lot of text, because again, if the jury wants to read it, it's there. You're not going to be presenting. This type of solution for academic usually doesn't work too well, or for clients, you're not going to be handing like a booklet to them. And we like to pair the text with hand sketches. So you can see that we're using a lot of different solutions when it comes to the visual communication aspect. It's not only sections and plans and realistic renderings, it's diagrams, it's hand sketches, it's different types of exploded axonometrics. It's a lot, like you can use a lot of different approaches so that you can translate that idea from your head to the paper or to a screen so that the client or the audience can understand. So hand sketches were used so that each topic here, each topic of the paragraph was paired with one of the sketches. So if they decided to read it, it was a little bit of a visual aid to them. And the hero image from the project, the hero image is the one that, again, it's the face of the project. It's what they're going to look like and say, okay, so the project looks like this. You got to be strong. You got to be really impactful. And I wanted to show this board because if we had more time, we would represent this a little bit better. When it comes to the plans, for example, this diagram was like we had 2 hours before the submissions closed. We did that diagram to show the context and the fact that we understood. I don't know if you can see it from there, but the fact that we understood that there was a possible neighbor that was going to be built in the future, and that we were doing the project considering this neighbor that wouldn't affect the sunlight of the bedrooms. Then we ended up just putting this here, which is a zoomed in of that, because when the deadline comes, you gotta do what you gotta do, right? But if we had more time, this would have been looked better. But I don't think we would have gotten second place or first place, because after all, it's going to be built. So the project is really what's going to dictate who gets to take the prize home and build it. Then to finalize the contractors, which are construction drawings. Here you're thinking of clear technical drawings that are easy to read, because even if you think that technical drawings are just boring and you gotta do it because you gotta do it, there's a way to do it, and there's principles and fundamentals that you gotta follow. And good visual communication skills definitely come in handy. For example, this project is one of the buildings that I worked on when I was a junior architect in a small firm. A small residential building. This was done in ArchiCAD. Well, this was done in ArchiCAD, but you can do it in Revit. I know you guys use Revit here, right? But Vectorworks is also another BIM software that's not widely used, but it exists. But here you're mostly thinking about exporting the IFC file, which is you're going to be sharing with other contractors. But also you're going to be exporting plans, these like basic construction drawings. This is just one of the many plans that we had to be sent out to the engineer team or the hydraulics, all the teams involved to make the building. So what I want to say is that being creative and exploring that boundary of visual communication as architects still requires you to understand the fundamentals of technical drawing, which is something that you learn a lot in school. Maybe the actual visual communication part, the renderings, how to use Photoshop, Illustrator, you brush on it, but there's so much you got to learn as the technical part as architects. So this you got to do right. From there, then you explore. You can be creative. And I'm talking here about line hierarchy, thicknesses, scale, level of detail, clarity. This is a really basic plan, but just to show you that if you do the walls correctly, the furniture, like everything, like you look at it and you read the plan clearly, even without anything. If this was just one line weight, then it would have been wrong, for example. So to sum it up, like academic, time to experiment with different styles in an environment that encourages creative exploration. Competitions, I'll say, that focus on bold, innovative visuals. Clients, it's about being clear, about understanding who it is on the other side, and the presentations are usually more intimate. You're exchanging with the client so much that it's not about being so impactful at the beginning, but trying to convince the client that the project is really what you believe in, you have thought in your head. Then contractors is precise, highly detailed drawings, but also with the fundamentals done right. Okay, so from here you saw that there are a few examples that I brought you. We talked about the audiences, and now I want to show you a few of these styles and talk about the techniques of representation and visualization. And here, instead of just bringing my own, I'm going to bring examples from real architecture practices so that I show you that it's not just something I'm saying or I'm doing, but it's taken serious by many architects around the world. The first example is the classic realistic render. And here I brought as an example just an archivist office that does realistic renderings for a living, like playtime, with 2 amazing images or even mirror. And these are amazing renderings, but as a student, don't feel pressured to compare yourself to them. There's a team behind each of these images. There's a team dedicated to each step of the visualization process. That sometimes as a student, you want to copy, you're going to get to that level, or even as a freelance architect, you want to get to that level, but you got to remember that sometimes you're designing everything and then you're going to do the renders at the end. So they are great as inspiration, but just understand the difference. And by the way, I've just did a video on the 23 visualization studios every architect should know, so I would love to dive more into and analyze each of the images and dive deeper into this. But there I showed the 23 that I think that I did a curation. And if you want to advance your rendering skills, I think this is a great place to start. Not only tutorials and courses, but learning from other people. And here I brought, maybe on the other side of realistic renderings, I brought Fala Atelier. I think most of you might know their work. They create these very abstract collages that doesn't work for every type of client, but they are known for their style. And the clients that seek them, they already expect this type of artistic approach. And they are super great at what they do. Each piece is like a masterpiece. Personally, it's hard to, I can imagine it's hard to convince a client with a collage like this, but they're not only trying to show the realism of it, but maybe explore a mood or a feeling of the space. They are almost like artists. And you might be thinking now, so is that it, like realistic or artistic? It's one or the other, like switches. You turn on the realistic switch and then you gotta do D5, full realistic all the time, or artistic, and then you gotta go collages and never touch a render engine. Not exactly. I see this more of maybe sliders, if you can think of it. You can be realistic, but you can also bring a little bit more personality into the images. And you can even be technical with it, like the diagrams from the final thesis I showed you. It's very technical, but it's also very artistic. So I have here a bunch of references of firms, just a simple Google search, a simple look at some of the firms that I like and some of the firms that I got recommended by people that do different work that still get you to visually communicate their projects, but without sticking to either realistic or artistic completely. Like Nord Architects, and this has a really cool render feel that reflections on the reflections on the building are perfect. You can tell that it's glass. You can see that there's shadows. The people are very realistic, but that has this collage feel that almost like if you know a firm that you like and they have this specific style, you can tell that the project's from them. Another example from them, and they even went as far as like connecting the style of the physical model to the elevation and even the blend. So this has a unifying feeling. That every part of the visual communication was thought out from the ground up. Yellow Office goes towards more of the collage approach. This is almost like a composition itself. So it's a plan with a little bit of elevation and an aerial view. And then this collage, personally, I feel that it tells more than it could, even if it was a realistic render. You can almost sense yourself in there. And it's a beautiful composition. It tells a lot about the space. Now, BDR, Bureau, is a recent one to me. I brought just one or two examples, but I highly recommend checking them out if you're looking to be extra creative with your presentations. They do this very textured style renders, and they even go with some hand sketches over like isometrics. It's amazing, like the work. Obviously, I'm talking here about the visual communication part, but the design aspect, like, I mean, we could have done a presentation just only on that. Turner works with this specific interior image with, in contrast with Fala Atelier that I showed you. This one is It's still a collage, but you can see that it has a lot of depth. You can feel the space, how big it is, how deep it is. The reflections on the glass don't exist that much, but you can see that the ground has a lot of texture. There's a lot of shadow here. The people inside are realistic, are done with 2D cutouts, but are well placed. Publica, and then here to bring a little bit of difference from the past ones, just a 2D top-down view, like a site plan, can also have a little bit of that extra creativeness. This is a zoomed-in version. You can see a lot of detail. So here, this is a urban project that it doesn't have to be that plain 2D boring, and it tells so much more about the project than just a technical drawing. Okay, so with these examples, you might be thinking, so what type of software do I gotta learn? Is it like a specific way to do this? And in reality, there's no single solution. We have a ton of tools at our hands that we can use, like the BIM software that you usually. I don't know if all of you start from a BIM software, sometimes in AutoCAD, but they only get you so far, and there's a lot of limitations when it comes to 3D modeling here. So that's why you guys, I know that you guys use Rhino here, right? That you rely on a powerful 3D modeler to be able to try to model what's in your head as a 3D space, or SketchUp. That's also a little bit more easier to use, but a little bit more limited. Then we've got the category of the render engines, and here I brought Enscape D5, Twinmotion, Lumion, and the V-Ray. That's still one of my favorites, but it's being less and less used. But the real-time engines, they allow us to get this realistic sense, this realistic view without too much time, and they are amazing tools as well. I only sometimes worry that all of us can get generic results quite quickly, because it's just with one push of a button you get a realistic result. So if you do more work on top of that, then you can stand out and have a unique image. And why not talk about Corona, Blender with the Cycles, 3ds Max as a 3D modeler, Unreal Engine. I could really name a lot of tools here. As a student, I don't know if you use this, but I personally don't recommend it. And even specifically for architects in architecture practices, they don't give us the same sense of design capabilities as the day-to-day use of architects as SketchUp or Rhino or ArchiCAD, Revit does. Here it's more about getting as realistic as possible and have the most control and advanced capabilities, but not so much as using them in a design process. 3ds Max UI, it's ugly. So you're gonna design that, it's not made for architects. And then here I brought the Adobe suite, like Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. Those are tools you know about. And I've even brought Premiere and After Effects, which are not commonly used by architects, but more and more we're seeing how social media can be used by us, by architects, in video formats. So with D5, you can easily export a video, but if you just export a video and try to use as that, it's just like trying to export something directly from Rhino and then using just as that. Like if you want to make a video, it's about like sound effects, trying to convey a feeling within the video. It's using that tool to add a mood and a feeling to the video. So Premiere, it's more of a generic editing software we use a lot to make videos, and After Effects is like Illustrator for videos. Like it's amazing. It allows you to do a lot of animations and specific things. But I know that they're specific. I mean, I could do a whole presentation on each of them, and I use pretty much all of these tools, apart from these ones. No, I don't use them. I don't think it's. And if I'm gonna use them and I'm gonna help you guys, like, what's the point of? I'm curious. Like, I'll probably do a video on Blender, for example, just to save myself here of and then you see a video of me doing Blender. But I think they are powerful tools. But I focus mostly on what architects can use on a day-to-day basis. And I want to focus here on Photoshop, because I think it's one of the most versatile tools that is, and can give you a lot of creative freedom with a lot less time invested, especially now with AI coming up and the fact that we can use D5 with an AI filter, But if you use just an AI filter as is, you kind of ruin your render and it looks all AI junk mixed in there. So with Photoshop, you can kind of combine it and really elevate your work using the specific parts of AI. So Photoshop is amazing. And Photoshop, but you could be GIMP or what's the other one? Affinity, like any of the image editing software. The Photoshop is kind of my favorite. And then if you connect that to your BIM or 3D workflow, it's really powerful. InDesign and Illustrator as well. As students especially, you're going to be using them. But if you're a first year or a second year and you want to start somewhere, let's say start with Photoshop as this extra creative tool. So I brought here a few of examples, my examples of how I could elevate the images using Photoshop. So this is a render of an event, and this was done inside a stadium. So we had to design this quick UFC ring. This kind of sells the idea to the client, but with Photoshop in a lot of hours, I could take from this to this and really tell a story. And he really convinced the client that, this was an international firm, this Brave, that hired us to do this specific fight that was going to happen, and they wanted to know if we were up for the job. So showing this, I mean, they know how this can become and what this can deliver, but showing this is something else. I mean, I'm showing you the black and white photo, but I did in colors. It's just that the black and white is a little bit more impactful, personally. And this was done when I was an intern at this architecture firm that I used to work. And I had a lot of free time there. I was the image guy. So they said, hey, can you make this realistic? And I could try to model more and add the people in 3D. But using Photoshop and just doing some quick collages, it's much faster. And it got me a better result than I could ever think of doing in 3D. Plus a lot less time invested. That's what I'm seeing. Photoshop, it's a lot of work, but if you compare that to 3D, it's not one or the other, but in this case, it made too much sense. This is an international competition in Zurich that I was hired to visualize this interior space. And the render looks good. Not as impactful as the other one, but looks good, the render. And with Photoshop, I could show the life of the space. This was sort of like a town hall, civic space that the people in this, it was Zurich, yeah, I think it was Zurich or somewhere in Switzerland. So with Photoshop, I was able to add the people and really show the mood of it. Following up the bowling alley, a basic render, but with Photoshop, a story is being told. Like the client almost feels like he's playing bowling there. Going into more of an artistic style, we did this plaza to a small city in Brazil. And it was just about showing the plaza concept instead of just trying to show the entire space. So with these collages, I was able to, with the architecture team, show more or less how the design proposal was, but without actually committing to modeling everything. And this had to be a quick turnover. Like we had small time to do these images. So this was a solution that we found that really worked out great for both the client and us. So this is the stadium I was talking about with the UFC sort of scenario. And then we had another event, this time a volleyball event, international event, and I had to show how the space would look in the event. So with Photoshop in a few hours, I was able to like really make this come to life. In 3D, imagine having to model the entire stadium and fill this up. And so we worked with what we had, this archive photo of the stadium. And the actual bleachers here, the seating area, that's 3D, but that is matched perspective with the photo and then rendered. And then following to the last examples here, there's this diagram that I did for a post-grad program at Escola da Cidade, that school that I mentioned, Escola da Cidade. So this is a basic 3D view, but I wanted to show the concept of this building in a more artistic way, that there's a vertical garden connecting all of the different levels. This is a multifunctional building. So with this more artistic approach, using a hand and illuminating this nucleus, I was able to use that image to explain more about the concept of the project. And this is a partnership with Saboia Ruiz Arquitetos, that same that we're doing the health facilities. This was a competition for a memorial. And if you're thinking about memorial, it's very dramatic. This was a memorial for like people that had died in an accident. So this had to be dramatic and thoughtful. The custom aspect ratio is very, very elongated, as you can see. It was just to fit on the board. So the board was designed, and this had to be very vertical. But I meant to zoom in to show that with Photoshop, I was able to like cut out the guy, place him touching the candle, and make the space feel much more powerful than just a simple render could. The water reflections, the stone. Yeah, this was a nice design to work with. And then the last example, another partnership with Saboia Ruiz. We worked on a lot of competitions. This is an old image of mine, but it's one of my favorites, especially this one. I think the color palette and the whole aesthetic of it really speaks to me. And it's not realistic. I mean, sort of, but it has this more artistic approach, but it really talks about the project in so much that just a simple plain render from D5 or Lumion without any post-production maybe couldn't deliver this feeling, especially with the light, the fact that it hit the sand in the middle. So I like this image a lot. I think it's very impactful. Okay, so after all of these communication tools, you might be thinking, how do I get better at this? One, you got to develop your creative skills. And I'm not talking about like just watching YouTube video courses or doing workshops. I'm talking about like exploring other creative fields. Like if you have an interest in art, photography, like becoming better at this creative part of our profession also requires you to be a creative person. It's not like you're going to use, going back to that software list, you're going to use D5 with Rhino, and then you're going to get a result that really speaks about the design. So you got to learn about other creative mediums and ways to express yourself. And then two, you got to expand your repertoire, like build your internal library of references. That's why I made sure to bring that video with the visualization studios. If you like to do realistic renders, you got to learn from what other people are doing. Just like in architecture, before starting any new project, we take a look at a bunch of references. If we're designing a museum, we look at other museums around the world and how was it done. Same thing here. If you want to upgrade your level of visual communication, you gotta build an internal library of references. And I recommend like studying and analyzing other images, and then going to museums and looking at other books and exploring different mediums. It will really help you. And then the last topic here that I usually also go through this, and just like the example if I had more time, I would work better on this. I'm going to give you two scenarios. Like you spend the whole semester designing, or the whole bimester, I don't know how you divide here, designing, and then at the very last minute, you represented the last 3 hours. This is very common, right? Scenario B, you reach the point that you think the design is all right. I think it has some solid basis. It could have been better, but you think at this point, you can explain to the client, or you can deliver to your professors, and then you give a bit more time to represent. And you think that through. You think, what are the specific drawings that I'm going to use to explain this project? I mean, if you could, you go for scenario B, right? Because scenario A, you're going to be feeling tired and frustrated. I know how you guys feel. I've been through this, and we go through this in competitions as well. You spend, like the competition that we got third place, we spent 2 months designing, and then I think 3 or 4 days actually doing the renders. And the team kept changing the design until the last minute. Like, I was mad at them, because it's no use to have a good design if you cannot represent it. I mean, ideally, if you could, you choose scenario C. A little bit less, a little bit out of this, or even like a lot more time designing and a lot more time representing. That's the thing. But deadlines hold us, and every architect deals with deadlines. So learning to work with them is essential to our profession. And here I'm just bringing this so that the representation part doesn't go unnoticed. It's how we communicate as architects. So think about the scenario C here. And a project will never be done, to be honest. If you talk to like all of the architects, if they had more time, they would probably keep refining the design. I'm not saying that you should not work on the design as enough as possible, and you gotta have a solid design at the end of the day, but just know when it's time to stop and then actually represent and visualize. Yeah. And realistically, it's not like that. It's more like while you're designing, you'll start thinking of what images and drawings you're going to be using. Especially with competitions, you'll do like a preliminary board with the individual spaces for each of the images and diagrams, and then as you design, you develop the 3D model more on the specific views. Because it's no use having an amazing idea that solves your project in a unique way if the audience can't understand it. If the professor doesn't know what you're thinking, it doesn't matter. If the client on the other side, you get to the client meeting with just like a basic 3D print, and they don't actually understand, because remember, you're an architect, you've gone to school, you know how to visualize a space in 3D, a client doesn't. In representation and visualization are not just a step. I know I've talked only about this as if this was just a specific category within our profession, but it's not. It's not something that you just do at the very end once you've finished your Rhino model, your Revit model. It's more like this. It's more like you work and you think about it, and you're always constantly thinking about how you're going to communicate this idea. Getting better at how you represent your work directly enhances your design process, ultimately making a better architect, or mejorar la forma en que representas tu trabajo mejora directamente tu proceso de diseño, lo que en definitiva te convierte en un mejor arquitecto. Muchas gracias.